In this video, I talk about how to get more conversions from cold traffic. And this is becoming more and more important because ad costs are ever rising, right? We have a lot of issues after the iOS tracking. There's more and more competition that's bidding on the same target audience and stealing your impression share. And it's really all about driving more revenue per user. Most importantly for conversion rate optimization is to have this clear understanding of who is my target audience, who are my customers. And it's really a lot based on psychology and data, right? So I would say it's even more based on the psychology that you as a person who is building the landing page or doing changes in the copywriting or something or building the offer, you need to have a good empathy to the people seeing it, right? To your potential buyers, so you can put yourself in their shoes. Like if they click on the ad, what is in their mind? Like why did they click on the ad? And now they're on the page. What goes through their mind when they read this? Or like what pain do they have that I can trigger? Or what desired situation do they have that I can talk about and create a certain image in their head? So that's super important that you as a person have this good understanding, and that's why I talk about psychology so much, that you also understand certain triggers, right? For example, let's say social proof. A lot of people say social proof is important, and yes, it's important, but mostly they just use it. And for example, the explanation behind that is we as humans, we have always been social animals. And back in the days, I think thousands of years ago, it was super important that your tribe, for example, says you can eat this, or you should be afraid of a tiger or mammoth, right? Yeah. And that's why social proof is so powerful, because at the end of the day, our brain didn't really evolve that much over the past couple thousands of years, right? Everything else evolved in terms of technology and like stuff that we use. But we as human beings cannot evolve that fast. And technology is something that happened over the past, 60, 70 years ago. So the brain is still quite simple and really focused on the same things. Like at the core, every human being is the same. We're all focused on surviving. We're all focused on finding a partner. We are all focused on mating and giving our DNA into the next generation. So at the core, the motivational drivers and desires for human beings are pretty similar. And also the way that you influence human behavior, for example, with social proof, or for example, with talking about pain or talking about the desired situation, right? So that's why psychology is so important, and that's why I spend so much time talking about that. On the other hand side, data is important. So what you just mentioned earlier, for example, the market research, right? I really, really like going, for example, into Reddit forums. So Reddit is a great place. Amazon reviews, Facebook comments, other YouTube comments, right? Like any place basically where your target audience spends time and talk about their situation, their pain points, their beliefs, what they think about, the questions they have, objectives they have. That's golden, because they will basically hand you on a silver platter what motivates them and influences them. So you can really greatly use that for market research. Yeah. And then, for example, if you go through that, right, you've been through that, like doing this research, talking to customers and stuff, then you will almost automatically come up with good ideas. Right? If I talk to 100 customers or 100 potential buyers and they all have the same story or same objection or same pain points, then I should probably trigger those in the copywriting on the landing page. And that's basically the mixture then of having this psychology understanding and looking at data from your customers and a bit of combining both of those, which is then conversion optimization.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because like more high-level entrepreneurs, most of the time, they're not like checking Reddit for fun, right? Yeah. So it's kind of like not something you would do automatically, but there is a lot of data to be found. And nowadays, I may be already using that. You have all these scraper tools where you can just screen record your YouTube and you can just extract all the titles and thumbnails and all that kind of stuff. So it's getting even easier nowadays. But are you using any of those tools, or you guys have like a process with your employees that are just doing all that research?
So thankfully to AI and scraping, everything got a lot easier. So just one example. we always had this manual process of exporting all of the customer reviews, right? If there's an e-commerce brand, they will probably have 20, 30, 50,000 customer reviews, right? We export all of that, put it into a big Google spreadsheet, and manually search function for certain words. How many times did someone talk about this pain point or this argument of why they bought the product? And then we would rank from the 30,000, let's say, reviews, out of 30,000, which percentage used this? And then we would see, like, out of the 30,000, which are the most used pain points, most used buying reasons, and all of that. And now it got, like, way more automated where you don't need to go through all of that manually. So that's one great thing. And on the other hand side, with ChatGPT or websites like Ask the Public, for example, they will make it easier for you to do the research. So in Google, I have a certain phrase, for example, I want to do market research. If I put the same phrase into Ask the Public, they will find similar search phrases and connect it to that and kind of give you an overview of what is your target audience asking Google. Which is crazy, right? Because then maybe you have one question in your mind, but then based on that or based on a certain keyword, they would then link all of the 100 other questions that your target audience is asking. So all of these tools nowadays make it way faster and way easier to do this research.
I'm happy that you're using AI because I'm like, oh, that's going to be awkward if you're not using AI for the reviews. But that's a great way, definitely a great way to do it. And I guess it's only going to get easier nowadays. Like you can just even like upload Excel sheets in it and all that stuff. So that's pretty cool. So, I mean, that's the first step, right? You collect all the data, and then, for example, with the pain points, you ask them like, hey, come up with let's say the pain points, the most frequently mentioned pain points, and then order and add them like in a certain order or like frequency or urgency. And that's one way how you come up with your ideas using AI.
So to make like a really good practice example of how we applied this to one e-commerce brand, there was this e-commerce brand called Pillow Slides in the US. It was one of these winning products, these like comfy slides. You've probably seen a variation of this from a brand. And they basically these comfortable slides in like all crazy colors. And we did the same process, exported all of the reviews, and then we found out two really interesting things with this research, which was one, most of the customers were nurses, because nurses, they are on their feet all day and they usually have like feet pain or back pain, right? And they really want comfortable shoes. And secondly, the most used phrase or like product benefit was it feels like walking on a cloud. And then what we did basically for the landing page, we just basically took those, created like a new copywriting headline, and we wrote as a headline, feels like walking on a cloud. And then below that, we put a testimonial from a nurse, right? Talking about, I'm so happy I bought them. It helped me get rid of my feet pain as a nurse. And that increased conversion rate by like 15, 16%, like crazy amount, right? Because it's logical, right? Like you use the words from your customers that they give you against them, basically, right? It resonates so much more with them and it gives them exactly what they want to hear. And that's why this process is so powerful.
Yeah, and we, before this podcast, talked about it. Like you kind of go through this process for your customers or for yourself every 3 months, right? Where you do like a whole big research again, just to make sure that you're not missing anything, to see if things are changing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say like all around 3 to 6 months, really a bit depending on like market situation, trends. Is there like a big shift? Is something happening? It's also different from geolocation to geolocation. So for example, in the US, something that's changing everything right now is the presidential election. Right? Like leading into that and now after that. Or like other big changes in the economy or trends that are happening. And then, or like if you have a new product launch, right? Like you need to do a new research. So I would really kind of go through the process every like 3 to 6 months, or if there's like a big event or big new product launch that you have.
Got it. And if you look at surveys, is that something you guys are doing once a year, once a quarter, or do you automate that in a sequence, or how do you think about surveys?
So also a bit like a recurring process, like every 3 to 6 months. The two kind of surveys that we like to do, apart from the stuff that we send out to the customers, right?
Yeah.
Is on-page surveys. So maybe you've seen these pop-ups before. On like homepage, product page or something, they pop up after like 30 to 60 seconds and they ask you questions.
Yeah.
So basically these on-page surveys, and then post-purchase surveys as soon as they booked the call or as soon as they bought the product and are on the thank you or confirmation page, then have a post-purchase survey. So those two surveys are really interesting to get a good understanding of what goes through their mind while they're in the customer journey, and then also right after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But these website pop-ups or surveys you're running pretty much all the time, or you're running them until you have...
We do them in sprints.
Sprints, okay.
Yeah, because they are really solid and qualitative in terms of getting data, but then also it's a bit of a friction point, obviously, during the customer journey. So we like to do it like in certain time frames for like a week or two, just to get a lot of data, work with that, turn it off, and then maybe 6 months later, 12 months later, turn it on again.
Got it. Now, if you do all of this stuff, you have a bunch of feedback. We're not going to talk about like how to implement that, because then they can work with you and ask you as an agency how to actually implement it. So we're going to skip that step also because we could probably talk about that for an hour, how all of that stuff works. So then we're going to start with the split testing. Then you start running split tests. And we see a lot of people online posting their results like, oh, I did this new split test and I got a 50% order bump or whatever. Like a lot of really impressive data, but then you actually zoom in and you're like, hey, they spent like $50 on ads, or, and they got like 20, 30 website visitors. So I think it's interesting to talk a little bit about that. You recommend running most of the time for like a month a split test. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like how you guys look at statistical significance and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, we also had this conversation like 2 weeks ago in our last call. It's basically statistical significance. It's like super complex, but explained easy. It's just like let's say, data validation. Like, is your data valid? Are the results valid?
Yeah.
Or is it just random? So you made a good example already. If, let's say, I want to test two creatives, and the one has a 3x ROAS and the other one has a 7x ROAS, then first I think great. But if you only have $50 of ad spend behind it, it's a really small amount of data, so it's not valid. And the same is with testing on the website. A lot of people, they run a test for like 2-3 days, they have a 20% difference, and then they're like, great, I have an amazing result. 20% more conversion rate or revenue or whatever, and then they stop it. But then it could be random, right? And that's like the big mistake that a lot of people do, is they end tests early before they reach what we call statistical significance. So actually valid results and valid data that you can rely on. It's the same with the ad creatives. If you cut the ad creatives, like the one with the 3x ROAS after $50 in spend, then you wouldn't instantly ramp the second one to like 1,000 a day, 5,000 a day, right? After like $50 of data. And that's how you have to think about split testing for the website. And it's basically called false positive, because you think you made an amazing job, you implemented on the website, so you think it's a positive, but it's actually not, and it's hurting your conversion rate. So it's even worse. Like, you think you did an amazing job, you implemented, conversion rate goes down, and you fucked yourself, basically. So that's what you have to watch out for. In terms of rule of thumb, what I like to say, and this applies to most brands and marketers, wait 3 to 4 weeks. Right? 3 to 4 weeks on average, have around like 2,000, 3,000 conversions in the test, and maybe 20 to 50,000 sessions. That's like a solid rule of thumb in terms of it should be valid data, but there's also a lot of calculators. You can just go on Google, type in A/B test calculator, put in the data and the results you have, and then it will tell you whether it's valid or not.
But that's also what we talked about last time, that it's a little bit dangerous, because sometimes, like if it's over a time frame of 1 week, the calculators say that it's significant. But if you just think about it, just from Monday to Sunday, there can already be so much variance just because of the days, right? If you have one bad weekend or one good weekend, your results might be different. So even 3 to 4 weeks, to be honest, it's not like a crazy long time frame, right?
Yeah.
So that's, going back there, that's, do it for a month, 3-4 weeks. Don't get happy after 1 week. All right. So you mentioned that you pretty much split test everything 50-50, and there's only one reason to shut it down like after 2 or 3 days, and that's if you really see a big decrease in conversions, right? Like what kind of decrease do you see, and then you shut it down?
So it's basically like let's call it minimize risk or minimize loss.
Yeah.
It's super rare, but it can happen that for the first 3, 4, 5 days, it's, let's say, like a 20% worse performing.
Yeah.
Then I would cut it short early because we don't want to jeopardize that much revenue, and it's just too big of a risk.
Yeah.
And that's the only case where we would cut it early. If for like 3, 4, 5 days, it's performing significantly worse. That's the only case where we cut it early. If it's like, let's say, 5-10% in the first couple of days, then it can still change. We had it so many times that then after a week it changed, and over the 4-week period it then overall outperformed the control.
Yeah.
So that's why it's also important to look at longer time frames. But yes, if it's a significant, let's say 20% or more decrease for 3, 4, 5 days, I would just cut it off early.
Got it. And I guess now I'm thinking out loud, how do you do that around Black Friday, right? Because you don't have that whole month. So then you test for 1 or 2 days, and then you switch, or are you not doing that much testing around Black Friday?
So basically what we do for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and it's interesting you asked this, for A/B testing, it's typically 50-50% traffic split for a month.
Yeah.
That's it. You look at it, maybe you cut it early after 5 days if it's really worse, but typically 99% you just let it run for a month and look at the results and then implement it or not.
Yeah.
For Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because you spend so much money, you have so much traffic on the website, what we do is pretty similar to intraday scaling. So for example, like intraday scaling for like all of the creatives, you like increase and decrease the budget every hour, maybe even every couple of minutes. And that's pretty similar to what we do in the pages. So in that case, we, for example, will create not only one change, but for example, 3 or 4 different pages.
Yeah.
3 or 4 different landing pages, 3 or 4 different product pages and everything. And then what we will do is look at everything in real time and then shift the traffic between those. So we look at the conversion rate, we look at the revenue per session, we look at the revenue that it's doing and the profit it's doing. And then based on that, we basically shift it in real time, all of the traffic. So we don't keep like a 50-50 split or like 25, 25, 25, 25.
Yeah.
But we look at how it performs for like the first 30-60 minutes, and then just in real time switch it based on the performance.
Yeah, got it. That must be pretty stressful.
It is. So Q4 and especially Black Friday and Monday for us, it's like almost 10 times the effort than like to the regular season.
Yeah. But I mean, most e-com businesses do a lot of their revenue right then. So.
Yeah. So we already have brands, like there's a lot of brands that start Black Weeks, or like in early November, they already start sales. So we have this huge supplement brand that I think I told you about, and they did like 35 million in a week. And for them, for example, for this whole week, we implemented a strategy of like shifting the traffic between the variance space and the performance.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. That's crazy. All right. So now we mainly talked about e-commerce. You're also doing some stuff in the info space here and there, and you did some stuff for Alex Ramosi. You're also working with someone who you cannot review because it's a big name, so a nice cliffhanger there. But what do you think is like the biggest difference between the info space and the e-commerce space?
Great question. So for info space, the biggest difference, mostly it's a straight funnel. Right, for like an e-commerce brand, let's say fashion, supplements, whatever, most of the cases it's more an online store and more of a journey where they go from homepage to collection page to product page, put something in the cart, go back to the collection page, different product. And it's a like way longer and like a bit more all over the place customer journey, apart from like the direct funnels that you have. And for info products, book a call funnels, opt-in funnels, it's a really straight journey. And I really like this because you can create a certain narrative, you can create a certain story, you can build certain pain points or beliefs in the prospect and then keep that narrative or that straight line throughout the funnel. So that's what I would say is like the biggest difference. And you also optimize for different KPIs. So for example, in e-commerce, you mostly optimize for revenue or profit per session. So how much is every single session worth? Right, and that's based on the conversion rate you have and the average order value. But for info funnels, so the opt-in or that they schedule a call, that doesn't really have a worth, right? There's no revenue associated to it. Obviously, you have all of the KPIs of like how much is a lead worth for you, how much is a book a call worth for you, and then you have to calculate that back a bit. But it's mostly optimizing the conversion rates and the click-through rates from like the funnel step to funnel step. Because if you can push more people from the opt-in page to the VSL page, then from the VSL page to the application page, and application page to the Calendly or book a call page, and then thank you page, more people are going to book the call at the end of the day. Yeah. Right? If you can increase all of the click-through rates by like 10%, that's going to be a huge difference. So that's really, really nice. And then I would say the last thing is for info, it's typically driven by like by pain and desire, right? It's with e-commerce, it depends on the product. With supplement and stuff, it's also really like pain point related or desire related. But for info, it's 99% of the time hardcore driven by they have certain pain points that they want to get rid of, and they have a certain desired situation that they want to be in. Yeah. Right? And then you can play with that. And mostly the biggest levers for info are the copywriting and the VSL, obviously, which also is the copywriting. With e-com, it's also a lot of like the product images, videos, design, and all of that stuff. With info, it's hardcore copywriting. So that's really interesting, and that's like the biggest differences between those two.
Yeah, or video editing, I guess, when it's like a really
for the
big promo video. Before we go into the difference with software, with SaaS, I'm curious about how you're working together with the media buyers. Do you always have access to the ad accounts, or are the media buyers communicating certain things, or what's the process there?
Yeah. So we don't touch the ad account because that's obviously the stuff for the paid acquisition team or the media buyer. Yeah. What we do have is we have really tight communication and meetings with the paid acquisition team, because it's super important for us to understand the strategy that they follow, and it even makes our whole learning and testing process more efficient. So for example, we had this at the UDI, for example. You may like these big hoodies from David Fogarty. And the media buyer, Marin Isvanik, he's like a friend of mine for like years now, and we've worked on multiple projects, and he's a super smart guy. And he was sharing the A/B test that they did on the creative side, and I was sharing the A/B test that we did on the pages. Yeah. So for example, on the creative side, they were testing, I don't know, one example I have in mind is different ways of displaying social proof. So do you just write it out like 10,000 happy customers? Do you show it with like 5 stars? Do you show faces? What works the best? And then he had the results, and then he communicated it to me, and then we implemented that on the product page. It worked. Yeah. Right. So it's really great because you basically have two forces that are constantly testing and iterating, and they both create learnings, and then they can also exchange those learnings. Yeah. Right. And that's the great thing when you kind of look at the whole funnel from acquisition, conversion, retention holistically, and kind of combine the teams.
Yeah, got it. And so you guys get like at least once a month a creative report, I assume, and maybe sometimes more often if it's a client that runs a lot of ad spend, or?
Yeah, I mean, really, most of the times, like we don't tell them like make this report or that report. Yeah. It's mostly the brands that we work with, they have all of that set up in terms of the reporting structure and everything. So we just ask for them to share what they have internally in terms of reporting, of like the KPIs, the creative reports, and also the bigger picture strategy of how they want to acquire customers, what angles are they going for, what's working well for them in terms of customer avatars, and all that stuff.
Got it. I mean, actually, now you mentioned something interesting that I want to dive into before we go again. So in software, so most of the time when you're scaling, I see that at some point you're not just talking to one market or one audience anymore. Is that also something you see, that all the brands that scale really well, like you used the nurses example before, that a lot of brands that scale do insane numbers, that they start also at some point focusing on different avatars and like different problems, or what do you see there?
Definitely. So, for example, we have this case with AG1 right now where we build like different paid acquisition funnels for them, and then they are all based on one angle for one customer avatar, and they are completely different to each other.
Yeah.
So I cannot dive too much into specifics now, but with AG1, it's just one product. It's basically a supplement, this like all-in-one solution.
Yeah.
But you can sell it to a lot of different avatars and like different angles.
Yeah, and problems that it solves, I guess. Or
exactly.
Yeah.
One avatar is, for example, like a really nutrition and diet-affine person. One avatar is just like the regular mom. One avatar is like a grandma with gut health problems, right?
Yeah.
Like these are just random avatars that I'm making up.
Yeah.
Because I cannot share. But then you have all of these completely different avatars that all can buy the same product. But obviously then the product benefits and value propositions are made completely different for the avatar, right? The really nutrition, diet, training affine person is more thinking about the, let's say, cutting edge stuff that they can add to their diet, right? The thing that's going to make the difference. The mom just wants to live a healthier lifestyle. And the grandma with gut health problems, she just wants to get rid of the gut health problems.
She wants to feel comfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's completely different customer avatars for the exact same products and completely different pain points and desires.
Yeah.
And then for all of them, you can then have different angles.
Yeah. But then it's getting pretty complicated for you guys, right? At some point.
I wouldn't say complicated. It's more of like a not even like a challenge, but like a really creative way of thinking about like what are all of the different avatars?
Yeah.
And what are the avatars that make sense? Like what should we go for?
Yeah.
Who can buy the product? Who has the money? Where do we see a lot of potential? Because obviously, like you double down on these avatars, right? You spend a lot of effort, you build certain creatives for them, certain paid acquisition channels, certain funnels, and then it should be worth it, right? But we see this with all of the big brands that do over 100 million or maybe even a couple 100 million a year. They just diversify. They diversify in geolocations. They diversify in product portfolio. Most of them, apart from AG1.
Yeah.
They diversify with customer avatars, and they diversify with channels. So, like step by step, there's like a lot of diversification happening. And even with AG1 just being this one product, I see so much interesting stuff that they're doing in their strategy now at this point. For example, they launched at Starbucks now. Which is super interesting, right? Like, I would never think about like a supplement company going into Starbucks, right? Like maybe you think about they go into pharmacy or they go into retail stores, but like making this move into a, let's call it like brick and mortar coffee chain was super interesting for me. Like to understand like the thought process behind, okay, for them, it has to make sense to go into Starbucks, right? They seem to be making money from it, or they seem to get more product awareness, right? Or for example, for a brand from Germany, we had the same case. They're selling these gel nail clip-ons, basically. So DIY at home for girls. They can do their nails with the set.
Yeah.
They scaled pretty aggressively, Facebook only, to multiple 8 figures per year in like super short time frame in just Germany. Now they've expanded to like all of the countries in Europe. And now I just had a call with the founder the other day. And I've kind of seen like the growth, because we've been working for almost 2 years. The growth was like this in the Shopify dashboard. So every single month, like they hit a new...
Up.
It was crazy to see, right? And you're just... it's interesting because it's... For some founders, you know the trajectory they're going to have just because they're so smart, right? And they really understand it. So it was really nice to see kind of the journey. But anyway, what he told me on the call is they just launched into retail, right? Because if you think about it, this product, like nails, it's called like nail accessories or like nail coloring or something, is typically an offline product for girls and women. They typically go into a, what do you call it? Drogerie, like a
some beauty store,
cosmetic store to buy it.
Yeah.
And now they launched in all of these locations offline in like retail stores, and this right now has the potential to like 2x to 3x the revenue.
Crazy,
right? And it's like they never thought about it, but now they tried it, and now they completely changed the whole business strategy just because it's such a new growth lever.
Yeah.
And right, like all of us digital marketers, we just think about Facebook, creatives, maybe go TikTok, maybe even Pinterest, something crazy like that, or like a YouTube influencer. But you would never think about retail, or you would never think about like what AG1 did with Starbucks. But he told me, which is also crazy to think about, every single day in all of these retail stores, they have 1.4 million people going into their retail stores every single day.
That's crazy. I mean, that you're reaching more people than with ads, I guess.
Yeah, like way more.
Yeah.
That's probably sessions in the online store over like a month or two.
Yeah.
And like your product is being exposed to 1.4 million people, potential buyers every single day.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Well, what's like the record of the amount of pages that you have been split testing or managing for like one client? Are we talking about like 100 or like? I understand you might not know the exact number, but like at some point, if they are doing like 100 million, 200 million a year, are you like split testing like 100 pages at the same time, or you just or most of the time 2 or 3 pages have most of the traffic, and then you just focus on that?
I would say the most amount of pages at a given moment will probably be around the range of like 20, 25.
Yeah.
Right, if you think about all of the landing pages, homepage, collection, different product pages, probably 20 to 25.
Got it. So it's not hundreds, and that's also what I meant. Then it becomes more complicated, but I guess you just have to be more structured and have right systems in place to not forget about any of them, and then you're gonna be fine. Cool. Okay, that was a nice little deep dive into retail e-commerce. Let's go back to the big 3 niches that we kind of have. Software. Do you see any big differences if you're doing CRO for software companies or anything different there?
Not really. I mean, it's a bit of a mixture depending on the funnel you have for your software company, whether it's they directly buy a plan or they have to go through a demo call.
Yeah.
And based on what it is, it's more like e-commerce or it's more like an info product funnel. So it's basically you, again, optimize for revenue per session, or you optimize for the best quality and highest amount of leads or booked demo calls.
Got it. And I guess it's also a lot, it's more like info-wise, it's more like education, but at the same time, it also has some e-com elements where like a good demo or good images that explain how it works.
Yeah, I would say SaaS is more on the e-commerce side. Because it's a product at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a digital product and it's mostly subscription, but it's you buy a product.